Spencer, I'd like to welcome you and ask you, could you maybe start off by introducing yourself, your role, and a little bit about your organisation, where you're based and where you cover? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. So my name's Mel Spencer, and I'm wearing multiple hats today as I'm talking to you. First and foremost, I'm a carer of 3 autistic adults now with complex mental health needs. And I'm also through them discovered that I'm also autistic ADHD because it comes from somewhere. And then when my children were younger, I couldn't find anything for them that they needed at the time. So I met another parent and we went, oh, we'll start something. And we had no idea what we were doing. And so whilst we originally started for our own children, and it was also around the time of the start of the NDIS, what we discovered was the biggest gap was for the unpaid carers, because no one gives you a handbook when you get a diagnosis or whether you get a life-ending condition, and you're expected to navigate this. And how do you navigate it without any supports? And so we have morphed into more of a carer specialist where we work with carers of all conditions, and we actually help navigate them into supports and services, because there is so much out there in the community, but how are you expected to know? Or the barrier of filling the forms out because you don't understand the questions. And so our role has completely flipped. We still support the autistic community, but we're very predominantly based in Victoria, working one-to-one with carers, and it's all through lived experience. And then as a result of that, with a lot of this programs we did, we discovered that the biggest gap, and they use the words hidden carers a lot, and the biggest gap is actually those hidden carers are actually already in the workplace, and they are trying to navigate keeping a job, paying a mortgage, navigating support for the person they're caring for, and none of the services are open outside of business hours, are they? So how are you expected to navigate all of this if you don't know? And so we started a social enterprise as well, re-looking at policies in the workplace, re-looking at flexible work, re-looking at how to best support carers in the workplace to understand, because as an employer, you're not expected to know everything and you can't.
So you have a lot of carers as clients, but how do you usually identify employees with caring responsibilities?
It's actually on our registration form or employee registration form asks that question. We also have jobs that require you to have lived experience. So that is another element of it. But suddenly, as we all know, caring's episodic. Caring can happen overnight. And as an employer, we had to be able to notice that. And then we also changed the documentation internally ourselves and don't put that pressure back on the employee at the time.
That experience and having employed and still employing carers, what are some of the benefits you've seen both for your staff, but the way your organisation performs when your carers are supported at work?
So we have, we've redone our policies, we've re-looked at policies, we've written up about ways we've worked, we create flexible working contracts for our team so that there's no expectation that they have to work in business hours. They've got a set amount of hours, and as long as we've also obviously got outputs, but as long as they can work within that space. And I think it's really important for us as well that we wanted to be available to carers when they needed it.
So tell us a little bit about the results and the benefits of supporting carers in that way that are employed by you.
So we talk about rural and regional and how we just assume the options are the same, and they're not. Right? And so we've got some regional carers, and one of the things I really noticed was they weren't taking up supports, or they weren't getting the supports that were available. And we discovered that we just assumed, but they weren't available in that area. Right. And it was all, well, no, there's no supports. I have to do all this myself, and she was running herself ragged. So we sat with her and said, right, do you trust us? And we worked at her pace, not ours. And we went through lots of steps, and it took, a good 6 months. But suddenly we managed to triple her NDIS plan, or her daughters. We managed to find supports for what she needed. Instead of being on waiting lists, we looked at doing things online and out of business hours. And so and she also accepted support for herself through some of the organisations that we were able to refer it into with her and her husband. But then what we noticed was a change in her work. what we noticed is she was doing more, right? She was more efficient. She wasn't as stressed. We were able to have a laugh together.
Yeah,
And it was
great.
really life-changing. And she manages a lot of the team members now up there too. So I look at that from a different perspective. And I also look at, one of the other girls who was able to, she came on saying to me, I don't think I'll be able to do this job, Mel, because of my caring needs. I said, can we just give it a go and an experiment? She now works full time, right?
Wow.
She's caring for 5 other people, but she's able to step in and out with her caring responsibilities as well. Like, she could be sitting at hospital doing some work, right?
Do you then feel like you've compromised the output in any way, shape or form because of that flexibility?
No, not at all. I actually get more work done from them because they're really passionate, they're loyal, they're wanting to help. They can see the advantages themselves because they're experiencing the services. So then they want to see, one of our team hadn't been in the workforce for 26 years.
Wow.
And because of her caring needs, and she's like a flower unfolding.
So it sounds like, one of the strategies you've put in is the flexible working hours. You call it fluid working in and out, having questionnaires on your employee application forms and things like that. I'm thinking that leadership plays an important, leading is an important strategy, leading by example or having it from leadership, that sense of support is a big factor in the success of the strategies. Would that be right?
I would totally agree with that, but it can't just come from me, right? When we're not a large organisation, but I have to also have managers under me embodying that same ethos. So it's team bonding. It's a ability to find connections that work with each other, which sometimes is hard.
And I guess that's all part of the trust, because you mentioned a couple of times the word trust. They've got to feel like they can trust to self-disclose. They've got to feel like they can trust to be able to say, this isn't working for me at the moment. Can we look at changing things around and changing up? And you're talking about visibility of carers and acceptance of carers through an internal website page and resources, by advertising a carer support group, by even having the words mentioned on application forms and things to say it's okay. And are these all things that help build the trust for employees who are carers to?
Yes, and there's also there's medication pieces, right, about who actually is a carer. And one of the greatest challenges, because we have lots of family-friendly workplaces, which is really important, but there's a big difference between normal parenting and caring, and recognizing that difference. So it's an education piece too. So we do a lot of work with education to show, well, this is what you would expect from normal parenting, but this gap in the difference is where the caring role comes in. And for many, it's a light bulb moment. And we also have a lot of young carers that are in the workplace that have never thought of themselves as that. And then there's this overwhelming grief too, that all the things, the opportunities they might have missed out on that could have made their life so different. So there's all, and that only comes by understanding. And one of the things we personally do is instead of an employee assistance program, we have a carer assistance program for businesses.
Okay.
So businesses that have carers that identify themselves as carers can contact us, and we then work with them. And it might be, so many people don't even know they're entitled to a carer's allowance, so it's helping them with paperwork, or they're not accessing any services and supports because they don't know what to access. And I think that's a really important thing to build up trust is, chunk it down into manageable steps, because people who are caring have higher anxiety. They have more things going on at any given time that they can, many that they can cope with. So let's break it down into one step at a time and work with them and help navigate what is really complicated, right?
Yeah. And listening to when you were saying about, being able to go to somebody that can point you in the right direction for supports and things. It sounds like it's important. An important strategy is for an organisation to have somebody in that organisation whose role it is to become familiar with and have the resources available to staff about carer supports and services that the government provides and other organisations that provide to them, so that, again, if a carer does self-disclose, they know who they can go to in the organisation to get information, and that's, again, that trust. With the things that you've put in place, the strategies to successfully employ carers, what challenges, if any, did you face in trying to do them? Any challenges that you want to share with us?
Yes, acceptance, right? They'll tell you that there's always someone else worse off than them and they don't deserve it. So giving themselves permission to even accept support for themselves, giving themselves the understanding that they're a carer and there's other, it could be siblings, could be young carers in the house, and that there's supports available for them. So there's this big shame factor too, particularly in cultural areas where they're seeing it as, well, this is my responsibility as a parent or a child, a daughter, or and not realizing that it actually can be, shared. It doesn't have to be taken on alone. And we find that to be the biggest barrier. And I was guilty of that myself.
Yeah. As an employer, how do you overcome that challenge for carers in your workplace that are feeling that way, or that, how do you get them over that barrier?
One is obviously being vulnerable to even have the conversation in the first place, which takes courage. Two is looking at, well, what do they need right here and now? Is it that they need to take carers leave? Is it that they need to reduce their hours for a short period of time? What is it that is needed to help them? And do they still want to work? Like there's all of these things. Is the role that they're currently doing best suited to what is going on in the home life? Do they need to do a transition into another role for a period of time? So we're putting in contingency plans. So saying, and what if we have a power blackout, when I'm working? Okay, well, here's some other options we can look at so that we don't all go into panic.
How do you know whether your carer support initiatives are working in terms of a business sense, retention, wellbeing, organisational outcomes? What are some of the factors?
We do evaluations and surveys, both internal, like for our own staff. We actually do surveys or recognition every 3 to 6 months. We also have lots of case studies where we can showcase what we're doing, and the sense of pride and the sense of when you walk into an area and you see those carers sitting talking to each other and comparing notes, you go, oh, my job's over. I don't need to do this anymore, because they've connected and they don't. And really, loneliness is one of the biggest factors that they talk about in the world today. And, the data clearly shows us that that's a really big issue within the unpaid carer space. But when you start seeing that reducing and they're suddenly starting to connect, the world's your oyster, because then suddenly life looks so different and you can find joy.
So it sounds like it's, you can see the positives for the carers who are employed, but from a purely business perspective, what would you say would be, have you had to compromise business outcomes as a result? Have you had any improvements to the business as a result? What has been from a business perspective?
Staff retention is really important, because when you lose staff, it costs you 1.5 times your salary to replace that person. And so we're noticing increased staff retention. We noticed better participation at work. We're noticing that because they're not feeling the weight of responsibility, because it's a little bit more shared, their output is much better. So we're not having to go and have as many meetings with HR to look at work performance. Instead, we're actually, the output is increasing, and not being able, and also not being able to choose between earning a living or caring, and having that dignity of choice to know that my employer supports me, enables the employer to go, man, I've got good team, you know, because they all want to be here. I'm not having people that don't want to be here. I'm having people, and even being able to come in and say, hey, NDIS keep ringing me. Can I have a quiet area in our office to do that meeting? You know, and you can see some of those offices, or you can see some of the places that have created little spaces where you can go and have those private conversations.
Oh, it sounds great. Is there finally any advice that you would give employers who want to attract and support carers in their workforce? What would be one top tip you'd give them all?
So carers innately trust carers, people that have walked a similar path to their own. And we found that to be a really significant factor in all of our dealings. The participant feedback we're constantly getting is that carer stress levels, wellbeing and mental health improved, and gaining confidence in accessing services. So we saw a huge output in that. And there's a distinction between accessing the person that you're caring for, services and support, and caring and accessing services and support for yourself, and having the employer to be aware of that. Just because they might be getting NDIS or my aged care doesn't mean that the carer is being supported. It's the carer recipient. So I think there's an education piece in that too. And I think that when you're checking to give the person permission, right, to actually help get supports, and having clear processes. And so sometimes it's about not having to know all the answers as an employer, but rather knowing where to go to get those answers.
Oh, terrific. Well, thank you so much for that. And thanks for the time. Sounds like you're employing carers very successfully, and it's been a bonus to your business.
Even myself, I'm employed too. I wouldn't have had a job.